This is Special Prosecutor Larry Clayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Clayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Clayman. There's more than just news. We are in a crisis. It's clear we're in a crisis. The Democrats are using COVID-19 and some missteps by the Trump administration, by the president himself, particularly his White House physician, who's a good-looking, very glib guy, but unfortunately he came out a week ago and didn't give exactly accurate information about the president's state of health. They're basically conducting what it's called an overthrow of this government. And to make matters worse, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, is now attempting through the 25th Amendment. She can't even wait for the elections. And frankly, the odds are now probably that Biden and Kamala Harris will win, according to polls. I don't go by polls, but everything is just caving in on the president right now. And I'm hopeful that God will bail him out and bail this country out like he did in 2016 when Hillary Clinton was defeated. But we have to prepare for the worst. And I'm going to have later on in this show a very wise television journalist, an evangelical Christian in Poland, Ivan Belastenko, who's going to tell you what happens in that country, what's happening in Poland. It's not what people think it is. It's still a socialist communist state in practice, and the ramifications for the United States in moving in that direction, because we're moving in that direction regardless of who wins the next election. And even if the president wins this next election, it's likely that the Republicans will lose control of the Senate. Not that they've done anything in any event, but it's going to be basically a bloodbath because the House of Representatives will be retained most likely by the Democrats as well. And the president won't be able to do much of anything in terms of getting anything through Congress. And in terms of his executive orders, to try to overstep Congress, even if legitimate, you still have on the bench, the federal bench, judges who are primarily Obama and Clinton appointees. They are radical leftists. They don't care about the rule of law. They don't care about the Constitution. They rule like socialist judges, like communist judges that Ivan's going to talk about, for their ideology and the party that put them in power. And then on the other side of the coin, you have the Trump judges. Now, President Trump, however well-intentioned, cannot really boast about the judges he's appointed. You'll have to get my book, It Takes a Revolution, because I have a whole section, a whole chapter on the Trump judges. I use the French expression, the more things change, the more they remain the same. He nominated these judges, and they were approved by an establishment Republican Senate based upon recommendations of Republican establishment lobbyists who are feathered, their nests are feathered by big money special interests. These judges, my experience, I've been in front of 8 of them so far, have no guts. They lack integrity by and large. Some of them are not very intelligent, but they got there through political patronage. How do you become a federal judge? Generally speaking, it's through campaign contributions. There was one judge recently from Rhode Island, this was during the Obama administration, who paid $500,000 for his judgeship. There's a judge also on the D.C. District Court who paid $38,000 for his judgeship, in addition to monies that were bundled by his law firm, Wilmer Hale, a mega law firm in Washington, D.C. Sound familiar? That's the law firm of Robert Mueller and Jeannie Rhee, who tried to take the president down. Now, they were clever. They were able to pay their way to get one Republican and one Democrat judge on the federal bench in Washington, D.C. And the same is true not just at the lower court level, but at the appellate level. So there you have it. And this is my experience of 44 years. You know, you can listen to Rush Limbaugh all you want. Rush is an intelligent guy. He understands politics to some degree. But he spent his life in a radio studio. And he doesn't know really what goes on in the trenches like I do in terms of the legal system. He still thinks there's going to be justice. Now, as far as people like Hannity, he has no clue about anything. And that's why his book, Live Free or Die, which I call Live Free or Lie, frankly, not only was it not written by him, it was written by his staff. That's obvious. You can see that from the credits in the book. But it's simply his nightly monologue, which usually ends, and the Democrats want to throw Granny over the cliff. And then his solution is vote for Donald Trump. Well, you know what? I'm not a cheerleader for anybody. I'm a cheerleader for the American people. I want to see the president win in my personal capacity. I will vote for him, and I say that in my personal capacity. I will endorse him in my personal capacity. But Donald Trump is not the be-all and end-all. And one of his problems is that he cannot communicate to the middle ground. He has alienated a lot of people in the 20% who are going to decide this election. And that is why, as it currently looks like, he's probably going to lose this election. I don't care what people say. This is not Hillary Clinton. He's the president of the United States. He has control of the power of government. He should be way ahead of Biden at this point, particularly since Biden is brain dead. Biden is a criminal. It's clear that Biden laundered money from Ukraine and China through his son, Hunter Biden, an ex-drug addict, a deadbeat dad who had to be forced to take responsibility for an illegitimate child that he recently fathered, a lowlife of the highest magnitude. And while one can feel bad about Joe Biden and what happened to his family early on in his young adult life, the fact is the man is a threat to this country. He's simply a Trojan horse. He's a Manchurian candidate for the radical left of all persuasions, of all races, colors, creeds, religions, and you name it. They're all bonding together to take control of this country. And if he's elected, they will have total control. But even if Trump is reelected, and of course I hope he is, in 4 years, what happens? The march to socialism and communism continues on under the surface in the colleges, in the universities, in the media. Look at sports. I don't watch the NBA. I don't watch the NFL. I don't watch pro baseball anymore. I just won't do it because, frankly, these people are morons. Okay, they're morons. And I cannot root for people who roll over, and that includes the owners of these sports teams, who are kissing the derriere of the radical left and the radical black movement, which is being used by radical whites as a pawn to destroy this country. Now, most black people are good. I have to say that, just like most Chinese people are very good. It's the communist regime in Beijing that we're fighting and are harming this country. But this is the realities, and that's why I urge you to go out and pre-order a copy of my book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. You can find it at barnesandnoble.com, at amazon.com, at booksamillion.com, everywhere, because I don't write like Hannity. Of course, I wrote the book myself. That's a big difference, based on my experience, actual experience in the trenches of Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. And we need to rise up, as Jefferson predicted. We need to wage a second American Revolution. He said it was going to be bloody. I'm trying to avoid that. I want to do it peacefully and legally, and I have solutions in that book, one of which is the Citizens Grand Jury, which we've talked about. So go out and buy It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. I'm not so much interested in what, if anything, I make on this venture. You know, I wrote it based on my experience. It was inside me. It had to come out. It had to be put in writing. It's my epitaph as to what's going on in this country. And it is serious, and it is cancerous, and it's destroying this country. And we're going to go the way of the Soviet Union, and now Russia, Poland, and the rest of the Eastern Bloc, and China, and Iran, and Korea, if we don't arrest it now. Now, I have a proposal. I'm writing a column this week where I suggest that we move the capital out of Washington, D.C. You know, when I go to Washington, D.C., I've got a lot of good friends there. I've got good friends at Radio America. I've got good friends elsewhere. But I just have this sinking feeling. There's a dark cloud hanging over the city. It is evil. It is corrupt. You look at these beautiful buildings and what's inside these buildings. There's a cancerous rot. And frankly, It can't be arrested. I think we should move the capital back to Philadelphia, where our founding fathers conceived of this great nation. Now, Philadelphia is quite liberal. It's got its big problems. It is corrupt. But if the federal government moves back and takes it over, we can squeeze those leftists out. And hopefully, we, the people, will take control of that government, not the hacks that we currently have in the executive branch, the deep state that is more powerful than the president himself. The court jesters on Capitol Hill are stuffing money into their pockets minute by minute and do nothing. And of course, the corrupted federal judges who are the pawns, the yes men of the people that put them in power. So that's my suggestion. Let's start over in Philadelphia, where it all began. Let's go back to the birthplace of our nation. We can even deconstruct the White House and rebuild it there. We can have the Supreme Court at Independence Hall, where it was in the first place. And we can do all kinds of things, but to remind us of where we come from. Let's get out of this town. It's more than a swamp. It's a cesspool. It's disgusting. And look at what's happening today. Whether it's the leftist Democrats on Capitol Hill, whether it's the do-nothing Republican establishment, whether it's the federal judiciary, whether it's the deep state intelligence agencies that have dirt on everyone, so nothing happens. No one's been indicted in any of these scandals. No one's been held accountable since the time I started Judicial Watch at a high level. Only a few lower level people have been burned, offered at the altar of sacrifice to say that we did something. Look at Lindsey Graham, his hearings. He's promised nothing. He was manhandled by Comey because they've got stuff on Lindsey Graham. You know, Lindsey, come out of the closet. Maybe they'll stop using that against you. He's going to lose in South Carolina in all likelihood. I'm going to be right back, but this is my message. This country needs to start over in the vision of our founding fathers, and let's get the hell out of Washington, D.C. I'll be right back.
Fearless.
This Clayman, he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad,
Special Prosecutor
very bad.
Larry Clayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm going to say something now which is very controversial, but it needs to be said. I hope the president wins. I hope the president wins, and I pray that he wins. And I do believe that God will do something in the next 3 weeks that could change the equation. But you know what? We also have to remember that God has destroyed many civilizations over time. Excuse me, getting choked up as I usually do. He destroyed Hebrew civilizations. You know, he destroyed the temple. He taught the people a lesson when they did not follow his guidance and his will. And Jesus, his son, obviously, dying on the cross for our sins. The high priests did not get away with it, and the Romans did not get away with it. The Roman civilization perished. So I think we have to be prepared for some hard times. And it may be that God really wants Trump to lose. That's possible, because that will force we, the people, to rise up ourselves and to reclaim our nation and to not look for a political messiah. There are no political messiahs. There are none. There's only one Messiah, Jesus, and there's only one God, the Father. And consequently, if the president loses, that may be a blessing in disguise given to us by God, because at the same time, we will be forced to do it ourselves, as we did it in 1776. We had no ruler then. King George III, totally corrupt, frankly, not as corrupt as the people we see in the cesspool of Washington, D.C. today. He had his yes men on the bench that rubber stamped everything he wanted. He tried to take away our guns so he would have total domination. He had his troops break into our homes, stealing our property, raping our women, pillaging. He tried to tax us to death, which is exactly what Biden and Kamala Harris intend to do. And he put into effect total control of the colonies, taking away its riches to support the rest of the British Empire. We became his engine to drive the corrupt British Empire. And that's exactly what Biden and Kamala Harris have in mind. And that's what the leftists have in mind, not just in Washington, D.C., but throughout this country. And that's why I want you to purchase my book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. You can find it online at Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. This is a manifesto for freedom. Again, it's not like Hannity's book. It's not saying, okay, vote for Trump, all will be solved. No, that's not going to happen because, first of all, the president would only be there for 4 years in any event. But our government is so corrupt, and it's being backed up by bar associations like the D.C. Bar Disciplinary Council. They're trying to eliminate people like me from the practice of law. 4 bar presidents of the D.C. Bar recently filed a complaint against Attorney General Bill Barr. I don't even like Barr, but they filed it vindictively because of what he did with General Mike Flynn, trying to dismiss the indictment of General Flynn and also statements he made on Fox News. Bar complaints against Kellyanne Conway filed by communist and leftist law professors that are being entertained by the D.C. Bar. I mean, the D.C. Bar, frankly, has been taken over by the radical left, and that's not anything to surprise. I can't think of one person there who's donated any money to Trump or any other Republican. I've been looking on the FEC records. In fact, they donate heavily to Obama and Clinton and the rest of them. So it's a full court press. Now, I will succeed. Okay, that's not going to happen, that they're going to remove me from the practice of law. They can try, and I like a fight. And I'm going to take them down before they're taken down. And I have various ways, legally and ethically, to attempt to do it. These people need to be removed, these leftists in the D.C. Bar. But that's true of every institution today, every institution. And it's not just the D.C. Bar. And the radical left has buried itself in, and that's why I want you to listen to Ivan Belastenko in Poland, because the same thing is happening in this country. And of course, Poland is just one example. You know, you have Venezuela, you have Cuba, you have all kinds of other places out there where socialism has destroyed the fabric of society. So who knows what God has in store? Only God knows. But I know this, we, the American people, must be prepared. We must be prepared to rise up ourselves. And we must be prepared to do it ourselves. We must have courage and not be afraid, just like our founding fathers who pledged their honor and risked their sacred fortune and their lives to found a new nation in Philadelphia, which is where our capital now belongs. We'll be back with Ivan Belastenko, and thank you for listening to me. Rise up and wage the second American Revolution before it's too late.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Clayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with a very fine person, a brave person, a colleague in the fight against corruption and the fight against socialism and the fight against communism. He's coming to us from Poland. You know, I'm 1/4 Polish on my grandmother's side, my grandmother Jetta. And his name is Ivan Belastenko. And I've been on his show, his television show in Poland. I want to introduce you to him. Ivan, give our listeners a little background in terms of what you do and what you stand for.
Sure. Thanks, Larry, for having me on. I'm very honored, and it's a privilege to be on your show and talk to your listeners. And so, as you mentioned, you've been on our television. It's actually not owned by me. I'm part of this television in Poland. It's a conservative, biblical Christian television. We broadcast out of Poland, but throughout the world through the internet. And we deal with anything to do with anti-communist agenda. Like I mentioned, we're biblical Christians, so we follow in Jesus. It's quite uncommon here in Poland, which is majority Catholic. but it's not Catholic, U.S. Catholic. It's slightly different. It's sort of what they call mainland Catholics. So they're very different, basically, from U.S. Catholics. But nothing against Catholics. Love Protestants. We don't have anything against any group of religions. But that's what we do, basically, in a nutshell.
Well, tell us what's going on, because the American people, frankly, are not well educated as a general rule. And they think that after the fall of the Soviet Union and Poland, everything became, as we say in slang, hunky-dory, good in Poland. Tell us what some of the problems are over there with regard to religious persecution, and also with regard to the way the government is dealing with COVID-19 and our plans to take action in that regard. And I'll chime in at the appropriate place.
Mm-hmm, sure. So it's quite a short program we're going to have today, so I'll try to run through this briefly. Obviously, it's difficult to get into fine details of every aspect of this, but I think the first thing we should all understand, especially people in the West, is that, like you said, the communists, basically, to put it, roughly, the communism never fell in Poland. It just basically disguised itself into a democracy, and the communists dumped their military suits in exchange for diplomatic and business suits, and it's just a big facade. There's no real freedom in Poland, how it would be perceived by the Americans. And out of that, we have a problem with it affects pretty much every aspect. But if you focus on the Chinese and what they've done, and we get to that in a second, but just to give a background of the influence that China and other similar former communist or socialist regimes can have in Poland, because the mentality haven't changed. It's still a socialist type of country, and it runs very deep. For example, there haven't been a single judge from the Soviet or post-Soviet era in Poland that has been jailed or prosecuted or punished for what they've done, with collaborating with the communists. And this is just one example. The entire mentality, like I said, of Poles at the moment, the foundation was never replaced. Socialism and communism was never replaced with something what you guys, for example, have in the States, a foundation of biblical values. It was never done, so it stayed here. So you can actually look into every aspect of Polish life, and you will see socialism inherent, and it's not even hidden. It's out in open. Everything from bureaucracy, loads of paperwork, unneeded paperwork. Look at the First Amendment, the second. Well, we don't have these amendments, but like if you're talking in the language of Americans, the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. You only allowed a certain freedom of speech that is within the narrative that is allowed. If you go outside of that, you have big problems, and they use actually what you guys probably know, shadow ban. They use that as well in the area of freedom of speech. You wouldn't get outright banned. You can still say, but they would use the same tactics. They would shadow ban you. They would prevent you from appearing in public television. So, like, none of us are ever invited to public television to any form, whether it be political or social or whatever. We're just not invited. We're not wanted. For example, public television discriminates against us and our biblical Christian ministry and church. They even call us publicly on their website. It's a big website. There's a lot of visitors. They called us a cult, which is like against everything, any kind of even post-communist law that exists here in Poland, but they do it. And so that's one thing. There's no gun laws. There's no gun rights in Poland. You're not allowed to carry a firearm. Obviously not allowed to use it. There's recently been some legislation to change that because we are in the European Union, and because of European Union has some rules that affect us, so we sort of benefit from it. There's been a bit of loosen up in the legislation for gun rights, but it's just a facade as well, because actually what will happen is if you would use a gun, there's a way to own a gun here. For example, if you're part of a sports club and you're a sports shooter, you can have a gun. You can even carry it from your home to the shooting range, even have it loaded. But if something will happen and you will have to use your gun, you'll be treated as a criminal. So it's not like innocent until proven guilty. It's the opposite. It's guilty until proven innocent. And you're most likely going to end up in jail. They're going to confiscate your guns. They're going to treat you as a criminal. And the process of unwinding that and becoming, clearing your name, it's going to take years probably. There's also legislation to protect you within your home if somebody breaks into your home, but it's the same thing. It's very loosely worded. It's basically up to the judge the way he wants to interpret the situation, and most of the judges are, like I said, post-communist, so they have socialist mentality, so they will treat you as a criminal as well. So this is just one example. If you want to build something on your property, on your own property that you own, if you want to cut down a tree, or if you want to set up a pond or dry up a pond or whatever, just basically you can forget about it. Unless you have major connections, then probably you can get something done. We can do a whole show, probably even a series of shows about the fact that how the communist mentality and social mentality is still here.
We will do that, Ivan. But the reason I wanted you to come on, not just in addition to the fact that I have Polish heritage myself, so I take a special interest in this, but is what are the ramifications? What are the lessons for the United States as we have the Bernie Sanders, the Alexandria Cortezes, the Tlaibs, the Rashida Tlaibs, the Ilham Omars, and the rest of the left, the radical left, now trying to socialize this country. And apparently they're doing quite a good job at succeeding it, particularly since for decades in the universities, in particular, the college professors have been brainwashing kids into this socialist mentality. So what are the lessons for the United States? Are we headed the way of Poland?
Yes, and I follow the politics of U.S. Quite closely, and I can see that obviously different states have different laws and different, even you can say, mentality. But the Democrat-run states are obviously some of the worst states with the biggest amounts of crimes and the most socialist mentality. And if Americans won't wake up from this, and I see there's this movement of waking from the state, but it has to keep going. It can't stop. If Americans won't wake up from this tendencies to socialism, then it's like cancer. It's like it's like what they say in the Bible: a bit of leaven will leaven the whole bread. So it has to be done through education, through raising awareness of people, and it's a very long process. They say it takes about a generation to unwind it. If you don't stop this and it will continue, it will eventually take over the United States. It will probably split the states, and use this divide and conquer methods. And the socialism mentality is just gonna spread further and further. So you have to unwind it completely. You can't even allow a single shred of socialism in America if you want to save it and bring it back to the great nation that it used to be. It's still a great nation, still one of the greatest nations, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So you have to completely get rid of it. You can't leave any shreds of it. And it's a very long, meticulous process, and it involves a lot of different layers. It's not just the president that has to do it, not just the education. It has to be on the spiritual level of churches and very different other areas that have to be involved and all come together to get this thing done.
Ivan, tell us the ramifications of this socialist government, to put it mildly, socialist communist government in Poland with regard to fighting COVID-19, the Chinese attack on not just the United States, but the entire world. Attack either by design or by accident, but we firmly believe we have class action lawsuits in Dallas, Texas, in Jerusalem, Israel. I have a criminal complaint that was filed by Freedom Watch, my group, freedomwatchusa.org, in The Hague, Holland. what's been the effect of COVID-19, and how's your government, to use the term "your" loosely, dealing with it?
Yeah, so this socialist mentality that exists it's a fruitful ground for this situation with COVID, because communists and socialists, be it from Russia or from China or from any other place, or even within, it's very easy for them to use the socialist mentality and the situation on the ground to benefit the progression of this attack, which I believe is a bio attack from communist China, and we should hold them responsible. So it's very easy to use this infrastructure of socialism and socialist mentality to further spread this virus, this attack. And even I don't know if your listeners know, but the Chinese have spoke about it for many years before the attack, that there's no way we can conquer U.S. by the conventional methods. We can't invade because people are armed. We can't use, even cyber is not good enough. But they kept speaking about this bioweapons attacks, and their plans to do it, and it's all obviously in Chinese, but it's easy to find. You can find it online. There's translations of it into English. So what happened basically is the methods that they used when the COVID-19 broke out and the pandemic broke out. If you look at it, it's a typical, what they call in Russian, in KGB, maskirovka, which is basically Russian for disguise or obfuscating or hiding something. It's a method of disinformation, also sometimes called active measures, where there's a lot of information, disinformation and lies mixed with truth that goes out into the public, goes out in public awareness. And this creates an uncertainty, and people start to get confused. What is the truth and what is not? Where are the lies? Who are they fighting with? Just creates a massive confusion. And from what we see here in Poland, both what happened here in Poland and also in U.S., it's a typical approach of maskirovka. They produced so many things, so many different theories, and pumped it out into the public. But now people are confused and they don't know who is right. They don't know who to listen to. There's different guidelines that first came out about COVID, and now obviously people and doctors learned a thing or two about this virus. So now the guidelines are different, and because previously something was said about this, it just basically discredited it. The whole information.
Let me just interrupt you here. I'm going to keep you over to our verdict section because we want to finish this discussion, which is about 6 minutes. We'll use about 3 minutes there, and then I'll sum it all up. But I'll be right back with Special Prosecutor with Larry Clayman and Ivan Belastenko. It's very, very important that you listen to what he has to say as lessons for this country.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Clayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with Ivan Belastenko in our verdict section, and what you were alluding to, Ivan, is that the government is using COVID-19 as a way to take further control over the people, either through misinformation or through stay-at-home orders, or exactly what's going on here, because the leftist governors and mayors in this country have used as an excuse to assert government power, to have control over our lives, to not let us do what we would do in our daily routine. And I see this thing going on in the United States for, more than a few months. It's going to go on for years. And God forbid if President Trump loses this election, and right now, I regret to say there's a very good possibility of that for a lot of different reasons that I dealt with earlier in this show. We are in a situation where we're going to have a quick march to what you've got in Poland, and we're going to have a socialist country which attempts to take over every aspect of our lives. Is that what you were alluding to with regard to the way the Polish government is using COVID-19, almost in complicity with the communist Chinese?
I fully agree with what you're saying, that the U.S. is on a track to, on a socialist train track. But what I was alluding to is, although the government, your current government and the deep state are using this pandemic to rob you of your freedoms, I don't think that most of them are openly aware of how deceiving this methods, this maskirovka, what I was mentioning earlier, this methods of deception are. They think, I think a lot of them think that it's more like a benefit to them being in partnership with China and the CCP. They obviously have a lot of ties, financial ties, and other ways that the Chinese communists are able to exert influence on them. But I think most of them are more like pawns. They don't play a major role in this. Outside of U.S., there's this whole CCP machine that is trying to dethrone U.S. from being a superpower and the one that controls the situation basically in the world. A term that I know Americans don't like, the police of the world, but unfortunately somebody has to be this policeman. So I think most of the politicians in U.S. they just are corrupt. The communists are using this corruption to force them to do things that the communists want to happen. So I don't think they're actively. They don't call the shots, basically. Yeah. So they've been forced because of their corruption to do certain things, and one of them, of course, like you said, is to rob Americans of their freedoms, which is certainly a thing that we have observed. And here in Poland, it's basically the same mechanism. They use their corruption against them, and they corrupt them further with various compromising materials in them. Some of them, they're risking their marriages because they have affairs with prostitution, that kind of stuff. Some is just plain out financial corruption. So there's different methods that the communists use to basically get control over the politicians.
Well, we see the same thing here in the United States. We see Nancy Pelosi just this week trying to exercise the 25th Amendment, saying that the president is insane and we need to have him removed. She's not even willing to wait for this election. She's, of course, the Democrat Speaker of the House from San Francisco. Ivan, I want to thank you for coming on. We're going to have you come back. We're going to do a whole show on this because you're very knowledgeable. It's great to see what's happening from the other side of the Atlantic, your perspective on it. And these are warnings for the United States. So thank you for what you do. God bless you and God bless our Savior for bailing us out. He will do it eventually. Thank you, Ivan. I want to now turn to the verdict section of this show and express to the American people the need to rise up. Okay, we cannot let this march to socialism happen. It will happen even if President Trump is reelected because it's endemic. It's in our schools. It's everywhere. It is like a cancer, as Ivan said, which continues to grow and grow and grow. So I want you to go out and purchase my book. It's coming out on October 27th. You can pre-order it at Amazon.com. It's called It Takes a Revolution. Forget the scandal industry. It says basically we have to wage a revolution. I'm trying to do it peacefully and legally, and if we don't succeed there, it won't be Larry Clayman and you, but it'll be others who do it a different way. So God bless you. God save America. God save Poland. God save the world. We'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Clayman. Until then, thank you.
Welcome back to the LG Tone-Free Wireless Earbuds Podcast. Today's guest is the notorious wireless pairing issues. Some say poor connection ruins listening experiences. What do you say to that?
I'd say it actually does.
I'm sorry?
It actually does.
What is that? A fax? You're cutting out. I think we lost him. Well, goodbye to wireless pairing issues, and hello to the worry-free connection of LG Tone-Free Wireless Earbuds. LG, life's good.
Thank you for listening to me. Listening to me.